Jake Collins walked into the massive lecture hall and looked around at the sea of alien faces staring back at him. He had been on Kepler Station University for 3 weeks now, but he still felt like a circus animal every time he entered a classroom. Being one of only 12 humans in the entire Galactic Educational Exchange program meant everyone knew exactly what he was the moment they saw him. He made his way to an empty seat in the back row, hoping to blend in as much as a 6-foot-tall, bipedal primate could among creatures that ranged from crystalline rock formations to floating gas clouds with eye stalks. The moth-like being next to him turned its fuzzy head in his direction and clicked something that his universal translator rendered as a greeting. "Hello there. I am Zixra of the Etherian Collective. You must be one of the exchange students from the Outer Rim territories." Jake nodded and tried to smile without showing too many teeth. He had learned early that most species found human dental displays threatening. "Yeah, that's me, Jake Collins. Nice to meet you." The front of the lecture hall began to glow as Professor Vexithari materialized on the stage. The Syrian was a towering crystal formation that shifted colors as it spoke, and its voice came through the biotranslators as a deep, resonant hum that made the air vibrate. "Welcome to Xenobiology 401, Advanced Predator Studies," the professor announced. "This semester we will examine the most dangerous predatory species known to galactic science. We will study creatures so lethal that entire star systems maintain quarantine protocols around their homeworlds." Jake pulled out his datapad, expecting to learn about some exotic alien monsters that could tear through starship hulls with their claws or dissolve matter with acid breath. The holographic display above the stage flickered to life, showing a familiar blue and green sphere hanging in space. Earth. His home. Our primary subject this term will be the apex predator species of Sol 3, designation Terra, commonly known as the Deathworld, Professor Vexithari continued. "We will begin with the most successful and dangerous of these predators, Homo sapiens." Jake felt his mouth fall open. He snapped it shut quickly as excited chittering and harmonic vibrations filled the lecture hall. Zixra's antennae were practically vibrating with anticipation. "I have heard stories about Terra," whispered Koloon, a large herbivorous creature from the Valdarian systems who sat in front of them. "They say nothing that evolved there should be able to exist according to natural law." "Indeed," Professor Vexithari said, apparently having heard the comment with whatever senses the crystalline being possessed. "The planet we call Terra represents an extreme environment that has produced some of the most efficient killing machines in known space. The beings we will study today have conquered their entire world through unprecedented aggression and adaptability." A 3-dimensional image of a human skeleton appeared above the stage, slowly rotating so the entire class could examine it. Jake found himself studying his own species' anatomy as if seeing it for the first time while Professor Vexithari provided commentary. "Note the forward-facing optical sensors," the professor said, highlighting the eye sockets. "This binocular vision configuration is found almost exclusively in predatory species. It allows for precise depth perception when tracking and attacking prey." Jake unconsciously touched the area around his own very much forward-facing eyes. Around him, several students made notes on their datapads, while others simply stared in. Fascination at the skeletal display. "Observe these specialized teeth," the professor continued, zooming in on the skull's dental structure. "These pointed canines are clearly designed for tearing flesh from bone. The grinding molars behind them allow the predator to consume both plant and animal matter, making them incredibly adaptable to various food sources." Jake ran his tongue over his own canine teeth, suddenly very aware of how sharp they felt. Zixra leaned closer to him, her compound eyes reflecting the light from the holographic display. "Can you imagine, Jake? Beings with teeth designed specifically for ripping flesh? It makes my exoskeleton crawl just thinking about it." "Yeah," Jake replied carefully, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sounds pretty scary." The lecture continued, with Professor Vexathari describing human locomotion. The skeleton was replaced by footage of humans running, jumping, and climbing. To Jake, it looked like ordinary people going about their daily activities, but the professor's commentary painted a different picture entirely. Notice the efficiency of movement, the crystal being explained. These predators can maintain steady pursuit speeds of up to 15 kilometers per hour for extended periods. Their leg structure allows them to run continuously for dozens of kilometers without stopping. This is known as persistence hunting, a technique that allows them to simply outlast their prey until it collapses from exhaustion. The footage showed marathon runners crossing finish lines, their faces showing determination and joy. But viewed through the lens of predator behavior, Jake could see how it might appear terrifying to species who had evolved as prey animals. Most sentient life evolved from creatures that needed to escape predators quickly, Professor Vexathari noted. Short bursts of speed followed by hiding or defensive postures. These terra predators evolved differently. They never needed to stop running, because they were the ones doing the chasing. A student from the Aquarian delegation raised a tentacle. Professor, how do these creatures maintain such endurance? Surely there must be some biological limitation. An excellent question. The human cardiovascular system is remarkably efficient. They possess what we call a dual circulation system that can deliver oxygen to muscles at rates that would be fatal to most species. Additionally, they cool themselves through water secretion across their skin surface, allowing them to regulate temperature even during extended physical exertion. Jake thought about the morning jogs he used to take back on Earth, the way his heart would pound and sweat would bead on his forehead. He had never considered it anything more than basic exercise, but apparently it marked him as a biological killing machine. The lecture moved on to human sensory capabilities. Professor Vexathari displayed charts showing human hearing ranges, visual spectrums, and chemical detection abilities. While not as specialized as some predator species, human senses are remarkably well balanced, the professor explained. They can detect prey movement through sound, track scents across considerable distances, and their color vision allows them to spot camouflaged targets that would be invisible to most other species. They can see in color? Asked a student whose translation came through as surprised squeaking. But that would mean they could detect blood, could identify the health status of potential prey at a distance. Precisely, Professor Vexathari confirmed. Color vision in predators typically serves one of two purposes: hunting efficiency or mate selection. In humans, it serves both. Jake found himself taking detailed notes, not because he needed to study human biology, but because he was fascinated by how his species appeared to the rest of the galaxy. Every mundane human trait was being reframed as evidence of predatory evolution. The professor moved on to discuss human social structure, showing footage of military formations and team sports. Perhaps most concerning is their pack coordination. Abilities. Humans can organize complex group strategies with minimal communication. They practice these coordination skills through recreational activities that appear to be training for group hunting scenarios. The display showed footage of a football game, with armored humans colliding at high speed while pursuing an oddly shaped ball. To alien eyes, Jake realized, it probably looked like ritualized combat training. They literally practice violence for entertainment, Professor Vexathari continued. Even in their current technological phase, they maintain their predatory skills through recreational combat sports and competitive physical challenges. As if to emphasize the point, the display switched to boxing matches, martial arts competitions, and wrestling events. Jake remembered his own high school wrestling team and how much fun those matches had been. He had never thought of it as practicing violence. Zixra's antennae drooped as she whispered to him, "I cannot understand how such creatures could evolve intelligence. Usually, apex predators do not need complex problem-solving abilities. Maybe that's what makes them so dangerous," Jake replied. then immediately regretted the comment as Zixra's compound eyes widened in what he had learned was an expression of fear among her species. Professor Vexithari concluded the lecture by assigning reading materials from the Terran Predator Studies database. Next week, we will examine human technological development and their transition from biological hunters to technological apex predators. Please review chapters 12 through 18 in your texts. As students began filing out of the lecture hall, Jake remained seated, staring at his datapad. He had downloaded the assigned readings and was already skimming through the first few pages. The galactic scientific community had been studying Earth for centuries, documenting human behavior and development with the same clinical detachment they might use to study dangerous wildlife. "Jake, are you coming?" Zixra asked, hovering near his seat. "The next lecture starts in 20 minutes. "Yeah, sorry," Jake said, gathering his materials. "Just processing all this information, it's pretty intense stuff." As they walked toward, Jake spent the entire week reading through the assigned materials, his emotions swinging between amusement and genuine concern. The Galactic Scientific Consortium had compiled hundreds of years of observation data on human behavior, but their conclusions painted a picture of his species that was both accurate and wildly misinterpreted at the same time. The files contained detailed analyses of human conflict resolution, social hierarchies, and technological development. What the alien scientists saw as evidence of inherent aggression, Jake recognized as normal human adaptability and cooperation. But he had to admit, when viewed from the outside, some human behaviors did look pretty scary. Tuesday morning found him back in the lecture hall, datapad ready and mind full of questions he could never ask. Professor Vexithari materialized on stage in a deeper blue coloration that Jake had learned indicated excitement or anticipation. "Today we examine human, pack dynamics and cooperative hunting strategies," the professor announced. "What makes this species particularly dangerous is not just their individual capabilities, but their unprecedented ability to coordinate group activities." The holographic display showed footage of human military formations moving through various terrains. Soldiers advanced in coordinated patterns, communicating through hand signals and maintaining perfect spacing. To Jake, it looked like basic military training, but he could see how it might appear to species that had never developed organized warfare. "Observe how they move as a single organism," Professor Vexithari narrated. "Each individual knows exactly where the others will be and what they will do, even without verbal communication. This level of coordination suggests a pack intelligence that exceeds even hive mind species." Zixra leaned over to whisper to Jake. "It's like they share thoughts without technological assistance. How is such coordination possible?" Jake thought about his own experiences in team sports and group projects. Humans did have an unusual ability to predict each other's actions and work together toward common goals. He had never considered it supernatural, but maybe it was rarer than he had assumed. The lecture moved on to human recreational activities, and Jake watched in fascination as Professor Vexithari showed footage of boxing matches, wrestling competitions, and martial arts tournaments. Perhaps most disturbing is their tendency to engage in recreational combat, the professor explained. These predators literally practice violence for entertainment, maintaining their fighting skills even in peacetime environments where such abilities should be unnecessary. The display showed two boxers exchanging punches while a crowd cheered. Then it switched to a judo match, where one competitor threw another to the mat with practiced precision. Jake remembered his own brief stint in his college boxing club and how much he had enjoyed the physical and mental challenge. "They call this sport," Professor Vexithari continued, "but careful analysis reveals it to be systematic combat training, disguised as recreation. They practice these violent skills from childhood through advanced age." A student from the Pacifican Collective raised a webbed appendage. "Professor, do all humans participate in these combat sports?" "Not all, but the behavior is widespread enough to be considered culturally significant." Even humans who do not actively participate in combat sports regularly observe them and show emotional investment in the outcomes. This suggests a species-wide fascination with violence and dominance displays. Jake thought about Sunday afternoons, watching football with his friends, cheering for their favorite teams, and arguing about strategy. He had never considered it a fascination with violence, but he could see how alien observers might interpret the enthusiasm for collision sports differently. The professor shifted focus to human endurance capabilities. The display showed footage of marathon runners, ultra-marathon competitors, and people engaged in various endurance activities. The human capacity for sustained physical activity borders on the impossible, Professor Vexathari explained. Most sentient species evolved from prey animals that needed quick bursts of speed to escape predators. Humans evolved as persistence hunters who could simply outlast their prey through superior endurance. The footage showed runners covering dozens of kilometers across various terrains, their faces showing determination and focus. Jake recognized the look of people pushing through physical barriers to achieve personal goals. But the alien interpretation was more sinister. A human can run continuously for over 42 kilometers, the professor noted. Some individuals have been documented running over 160 kilometers without stopping. They call this activity ultramarathoning and engage in it voluntarily, suggesting that such endurance capabilities remain active even when not needed for survival. Colon, the large herbivorous Valdarian, raised a tentacle nervously. Professor, if a human were pursuing prey, how long could the chase continue? Theoretically, indefinitely, Professor Vexathari replied. Historical records suggest that early humans could track prey animals for days, following them until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. The humans would then simply walk up to their helpless prey and kill it at their convenience. Jake thought about his sister Lisa, who regularly ran marathons as a hobby, and had recently completed her first ultramarathon. She was a kindergarten teacher who rescued stray cats in her spare time, but according to this lecture, she could theoretically hunt down and kill most of the students in this classroom through pure endurance. The lecture shifted to human technological development, and Jake braced himself for what was coming next. The display showed a timeline of human technological advancement, from stone tools to space travel. What makes humans truly terrifying is how they weaponized every technological discovery, Professor Vexathari explained. Within decades of splitting the atom, they had created planet-killing weapons. They turned space exploration technology into missile delivery systems. Every advancement in human science was immediately converted into more efficient methods of destruction. The timeline showed the progression from clubs and spears to gunpowder, explosives, chemical weapons, nuclear bombs, and orbital bombardment platforms. Jake had to admit that human military technology had advanced remarkably quickly, often outpacing peaceful applications of the same discoveries. Note the pattern, the professor continued. Humans discovered flight and immediately used it for warfare. They developed chemistry and created poison gases. They harnessed electricity and built weapons that could kill at distances their ancestors could never have imagined. They sound like a plague upon the galaxy, Zixra whispered, her antennae trembling. How did they not destroy themselves? Jake wanted to explain that humans had also used those same technologies for medicine, communication, art, and exploration. They had created vaccines that saved millions of lives, built communication networks that connected the entire planet, and developed space technology that allowed them to reach for the stars. But saying any of that would raise questions he was not prepared to answer. Instead, he raised his hand and asked a question that had been bothering him all week. Professor, the materials mention that humans are currently confined to their home system. How effective is this quarantine? Are there any recent developments we should be aware of? Professor Vexathari's crystalline form shifted to a darker blue that Jake had learned indicated concern or worry. An excellent and troubling question. The Terran quarantine has been maintained for over 2 centuries through a combination of monitoring stations and diplomatic pressure. However, recent intelligence suggests that humans may have developed faster-than-light travel capabilities. A ripple of concern passed through the lecture hall as various species expressed their anxiety through chittering harmonic vibrations and color changes. The Galactic Council is currently monitoring the situation, the professor continued. If humans have indeed achieved interstellar travel, it represents a significant threat to galactic stability. A species with their aggressive tendencies and technological capabilities could destabilize entire star systems. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He was sitting in a classroom full of beings who would probably react with terror if they knew that not only had humans achieved faster-than-light travel, but that one of these supposed apex predators was sitting among them, taking notes on their fears and misconceptions. After the lecture ended, Jake lingered behind as students filed out, discussing what they had learned with mixtures of fascination and horror. He approached Professor Vexithari with a question he had prepared about his research project. "Professor, I'm working on a paper about predator-prey dynamics in interstellar diplomacy," Jake said, hoping his voice sounded casual. "I'm curious about the psychological impact of predator species on galactic politics." "A fascinating topic," the professor replied. "The mere knowledge that creatures like humans exist has influenced council policy for centuries. Many of our defensive protocols and quarantine procedures exist specifically because of the theoretical threat posed by Deathworld predators. Has the council ever considered that humans might not be as dangerous as the data suggests?" Jake asked carefully. "I mean, all this information comes from long..." By the third week of classes, Jake had stopped finding the lectures amusing. What started as entertainment had become something much more serious and troubling. He was beginning to understand that his presence at Kepler Station University was not the innocent cultural exchange program he had been told it was. Professor Vexithari began the week's lecture with what he called Terran technological terror, and Jake settled into his seat with growing unease. While most species develop technology for communication, transportation, and improving quality of life, humans weaponized every discovery within remarkably short time frames, the professor announced. The holographic display showed a timeline of human technological development that made Jake's blood run cold. "Consider the pattern," Professor Vexithari continued. "Humans discovered atomic energy in 1938. By 1945, they had created weapons capable of destroying entire cities. That represents a 7-year progression from scientific discovery to weapon of mass destruction. The display showed footage of nuclear explosions, their mushroom clouds rising into Earth's atmosphere. Jake had seen these images in history classes, but viewing them in a room full of alien species who had never developed nuclear weapons gave them a different context entirely. Most species require centuries to develop safe applications of atomic energy, the professor explained. Humans immediately converted it into the most destructive force they could imagine. Zixra's antennae were trembling as she whispered to Jake. "How could any species be so focused on destruction? Do they not understand the concept of restraint?" Jake wanted to explain about nuclear power plants, medical isotopes, and space propulsion systems, but he remained silent. The lecture was focusing exclusively on military applications, creating a narrative of human technological development that painted his species as uniquely destructive. "The pattern continues with every major discovery," Professor Vexithari said. "They developed flight and immediately used it for bombing campaigns. They created chemistry and produced poison gases. They harnessed electromagnetic radiation and built directed energy weapons. The timeline progressed through human history, highlighting every military application while ignoring peaceful uses of the same technologies." Jake watched aircraft carpet-bombing cities, chemical weapons being deployed in warfare, and early laser weapon prototypes being tested. "What makes this particularly concerning is the speed of development," the professor noted. "From the right, Brothers' first flight in 1903 to strategic bombing aircraft in 1918 represents only 15 years. From the discovery of radio waves to military radar systems took less than 50 years. A student from the ethereal collective raised a glowing appendage. Professor, did humans not develop any peaceful applications for these technologies? Some limited applications, yes, Professor Vexithari acknowledged. But their primary focus has always been military superiority. Even their space program was developed primarily as a missile delivery system disguised as exploration. Jake felt anger building in his chest. The space program had been about exploration, scientific discovery, and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Yes, it had military applications, but that was not its primary purpose. The professor was cherry-picking facts to support a predetermined conclusion. Current intelligence suggests that humans have developed faster-than-light travel, Professor Vexithari continued. If accurate, this represents perhaps the greatest threat to galactic stability in recorded history. The lecture hall fell silent, except for the quiet humming of life support systems. Jake could feel the fear radiating from his classmates as they contemplated the implications of a species like humanity gaining access to interstellar travel. Professor, Colin asked nervously, what would happen if humans ever made contact with the galactic community? The Galactic Council has developed several contingency plans, Professor Vexithari replied. These range from immediate quarantine, protocols to, in worst-case scenarios, preemptive military action to contain the threat. Jake felt his hands clench into fists under his desk. The galaxy was seriously considering attacking humanity simply because they had achieved space travel. The exchange program suddenly took on a much more sinister aspect. However, the professor continued, the Council hopes that such extreme measures will not be necessary. The exchange program was partially designed to study human psychology and behavior in controlled environments. Are there humans in the exchange program? Asked a student whose translator rendered their speech as melodic tones. Not to our knowledge, Professor Vexithari replied. All exchange students are carefully screened before admission. A human would be far too dangerous to allow into our educational institutions. Jake felt a bitter smile cross his lips. If only they knew. After the lecture, Jake approached Professor Vexithari with another carefully prepared question about his research project. During their conversation, he learned details about the galaxy's surveillance of Earth that made his stomach turn. We have maintained observation stations at the edge of the Sol system for over 2 centuries, the professor explained. Every human transmission is monitored and analyzed. We have detailed psychological profiles of their leaders, comprehensive analysis of their military capabilities, and predictive models for their likely behavior patterns. That seems like a massive intelligence operation, Jake said carefully. Indeed. The potential threat requires constant vigilance. The Council allocates more resources to monitoring Terra than to any other single world in galactic space. Has this monitoring revealed anything unexpected about human behavior? Jake asked, hoping to guide the conversation toward the more positive aspects of humanity. Very little, Professor Vexithari admitted. They remain as aggressive and unpredictable as our initial assessments suggested. Their entertainment media glorifies violence. Their political systems are based on competition and dominance, and their economic structures reward the most ruthless individuals. Jake realized that the aliens were interpreting human culture through the lens of their preconceptions. Action movies became evidence of violent tendencies. Democratic elections were seen as dominance contests. Competitive business practices were viewed as predatory behavior. What about their scientific achievements? Jake pressed. Surely some of their research has peaceful applications. Some, yes. But even their medical research often has military applications. They study disease to create biological weapons. They research genetics to enhance soldiers. They develop surgical techniques that can also be used for torture. Every positive aspect of human civilization was being twisted into evidence of malevolent intent. Jake began to understand that the galaxy's fear of humanity was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature and culture. That evening, Jake sat in his dormitory room reading through classified files he had gained access to through his research project. The depth of galactic surveillance on Earth was staggering. They knew about human colony ships, military deployments, and technological developments in real time. What disturbed him most was a file labeled Exchange Program Objectives. The document outlined the true purpose of the program, which was to study various species' psychology, social structures, and potential threat levels. Human students were specifically excluded from the program due to unacceptable risk factors. Jake realized he was not supposed to be here. Somehow, his application had slipped through screening processes designed to prevent exactly his situation. He was an intelligence disaster waiting to happen. The next day brought an unexpected development. Professor Vexithari announced that the class would be analyzing actual human communication intercepts to study predator psychology in action. These transmissions were captured by our monitoring stations, the professor explained. They provide insight into human thought processes and social dynamics. The display showed transcripts of human conversations, emails, and social media posts. Jake recognized the casual, friendly tone of normal human interaction. But Professor Vexithari's analysis painted a different picture. Note the aggressive undertones in this seemingly peaceful exchange, the professor said, highlighting a conversation between two friends planning a weekend hiking trip. The humans are clearly establishing dominance hierarchies and territorial claims. Jake watched in horror as normal human friendships were dissected and analyzed as evidence of predatory pack behavior. A group chat about organizing a birthday party became a strategic planning session for resource acquisition. A romantic text exchange was interpreted as mating rivalry and territorial negotiation. This transcript shows a human discussing their occupation. Professor Vexithari continued, displaying messages from someone describing their job as a teacher. Notice how they frame their role as shaping young minds and preparing the next generation. This is clearly predatory grooming, behavior designed to create submission in vulnerable populations. Zixra leaned over to Jake. It's terrifying how they disguise their predatory nature with seemingly benign language. That teacher is obviously training prey animals to be more easily controlled. Jake felt sick. The teacher in question was probably someone like his own high school English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had encouraged his love of literature and helped him get into college. To the galactic community, she would be seen as a predator grooming victims. The fourth week of classes brought an announcement that made Jake's blood freeze in his veins. Professor Vexithari stood before the class in a deep purple coloration that indicated serious academic business. Today we begin your practical examination, the professor announced. You will work in pairs to develop comprehensive survival protocols for potential human contact scenarios. Your assignment is to create detailed strategies based on everything we have learned about Terran predator behavior. Jake felt his hands start to sweat as he realized what was happening. He was about to help design protocols that would essentially treat him as a dangerous animal if his true identity were ever discovered. You will be assigned specific scenarios ranging from first contact situations to containment protocols should humans ever be discovered within galactic space, Professor Vexithari continued. Remember, the lives of entire civilizations may depend on the accuracy of your threat assessments. The professor began reading out partnership assignments. Jake held his breath until he heard his name paired with Zixra. At least he would be working with someone he had grown to trust, even if that trust was built on a foundation of lies. Jake Collins and Zixra of Etheria, You will develop first contact protocols for a scenario where a human vessel is discovered. At the edge of galactic space, Professor Vexithari announced. Assume the vessel contains multiple humans and unknown technological capabilities. After class, Jake and Zixra found a quiet study room in the university library. Zixra spread out her notes and pulled up reference materials on her datapad, while Jake tried to figure out how to approach this assignment without revealing himself. "This is so exciting," Zixra said, her antennae practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "We get to develop real protocols that might actually be used someday. The safety of the entire galaxy could depend on our work." "Yeah," Jake replied weakly. "Exciting." "Okay, let's start with basic assumptions," Zixra said, pulling up her notes from previous lectures. "We know that humans are apex predators with advanced technology, superior endurance, pack-hunting instincts, and natural deception abilities. Any contact protocol must account for these factors." Jake watched his friend systematically list every reason why the galaxy should fear his species. According to her notes, humans were naturally violent, inherently untrustworthy, and biologically incapable of peaceful coexistence with other species. "I think our first priority should be maintaining safe distance," Zixra continued. "Humans are described as persistence hunters who can track prey across vast distances. Any contact should be conducted from maximum possible range." "What about trying to communicate first?" Jake suggested carefully. "Maybe they're not immediately hostile." Zixra's compound eyes fixed on him with what he had learned was surprise. "Jake, we've been studying these creatures for weeks. Everything we know suggests they're incapable of truly peaceful interaction. Their entire evolutionary history is based on dominance and predation. But what if our information is incomplete?" Jake pressed. "All our data comes from long-distance observation. We don't actually know how they would behave in a contact situation." "That's exactly why we need to be so careful," Zixra replied. "The risk is too great to assume peaceful intentions. Look at their history. They've never encountered another species without trying to dominate or destroy it." Jake wanted to point out that humans had never actually encountered another sentient species at all, but that would raise questions he could not answer. Instead, he helped Zixra develop a contact protocol that assumed the worst about every aspect of human behavior. Their protocol called for immediate military backup, maintenance of at least one light-hour distance, assumption of hostile intent, and preparation for immediate withdrawal if humans showed any signs of aggression. They included detailed procedures for analyzing human communications for deception and manipulation tactics. "We should also consider the possibility that humans might already be among us," Zixra said, causing Jake to nearly drop his datapad. "The professor mentioned that they're natural manipulators. What if some have already infiltrated galactic society?" "That seems pretty unlikely," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I mean, how would they even get past screening procedures?" "Good point," Zixra agreed. "But we should include identification protocols just in case. What physical and behavioral markers would reveal a hidden human?" Jake found himself in the surreal position of helping design tests to identify humans in disguise. They developed a checklist that included forward-facing eyes, canine teeth, endurance capabilities, competitive behavior, and what Zixra called predatory social dynamics. "Humans probably can't suppress their hunting instincts completely," Zixra theorized. "They would likely show increased interest in vulnerable species, display territorial behaviors, and demonstrate the pack coordination skills we studied." "What if a human had learned to control those instincts?" Jake asked. "What if they were genuinely trying to fit in peacefully?" "Impossible," Zixra replied confidently. "Apex predators don't change their nature. A human might be able to hide their true intentions temporarily, but their biological programming would eventually surface. They literally cannot help being what they are." As they worked on their protocol, Jake began to understand just how deep the galaxy's misunderstanding of humanity ran. Every human trait was being interpreted through the lens of predator-prey dynamics. Human cooperation was seen as pack hunting. Human competition was viewed as dominance behavior. Human friendship was interpreted as predatory manipulation. The next day, they presented their protocol to the class. Zixra spoke with confidence about their human threat assessment and containment protocol, explaining their recommendations for handling first contact scenarios. "We recommend assuming hostile intent until proven otherwise," she explained to the class. "Humans should be treated as armed and extremely dangerous at all times. Any communication attempts should be conducted through automated systems to prevent direct predator-prey psychological manipulation." "Excellent work," Professor Vexithari commended them. "Your protocol shows proper respect for the apex predator threat level while maintaining scientific objectivity." Jake felt sick as the class applauded their presentation. He had just helped design procedures that would ensure any future human contact with the galaxy would begin with fear, suspicion, and assumptions of hostility. Other student pairs presented similar protocols, each one treating humans as dangerous animals that needed to be contained rather than potential allies who might be approached with diplomatic caution. By the end of the presentations, Jake understood that first contact between humans and the galaxy would likely be a disaster. That evening, Jake received an encrypted message on his personal communicator. The sender was listed only as Exchange Coordinator, and the message requested a routine check-in meeting the following day. Jake had been dreading this moment for weeks. The exchange program coordinators were going to want progress reports on his studies, cultural observations, and integration experiences. How could he explain that he had been studying his own species as apex predators while sitting in a classroom full of potential prey animals? The meeting was scheduled for a secure conference room in the station's administrative section. Jake arrived to find Dr. Martinez, the human coordinator for the exchange program, waiting for him via holographic projection. "Jake, good to see you," Dr. Martinez said with a smile that seemed forced. "How are your studies progressing?" "Fine," Jake replied carefully. "Very educational." "I'm sure they are. Tell me, what's your current course load?" Jake listed his classes, including Xenobiology 401. He watched Dr. Martinez's expression carefully as he mentioned the Predator Studies course. "Interesting," Dr. Martinez said, making notes on a datapad that Jake could not see clearly. "What topics are you covering in that particular class?" "We're studying dangerous predator species from various worlds," Jake replied. "This week we focused on Deathworld creatures and their evolutionary adaptations." "I see. Have you encountered any information about Earth or human beings in your coursework?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Jake realized that Dr. Martinez already knew exactly what his xenobiology class was studying. This was not a routine check-in. This was an intelligence debriefing. "Some mentions," Jake said carefully. "Earth is classified as a death world, and humans are studied as an example of apex predator evolution." "How interesting," Dr. Martinez replied. "And what is the galactic community's assessment of humanity?" Jake spent the next 30 minutes providing a detailed report on everything he had learned about galactic perceptions of humanity. Dr. Martinez listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, but never showing surprise at any of the information. "This is very valuable intelligence," Dr. Martinez said when Jake finished. "You're providing insight that our long-range monitoring cannot capture. The psychological and cultural aspects of galactic fear regarding humanity are crucial for future diplomatic planning." "Dr. Martinez," Jake said, "are you saying that my placement in this class was not accidental?" "Nothing about the exchange program is accidental, Jake. You were selected for this specific program because you're psychological P." The final week of the semester arrived with an announcement that made Jake's carefully maintained composure crack for the first time in months. Professor Vexithari stood before the class in a coloration that Jake had never seen before, a swirling mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Students, today brings an unprecedented opportunity," the professor announced. We have arranged for a special guest lecturer who will provide first-hand insight into human psychology and behavior. Dr. Helena Cruz, a human xenoanthropologist, has been granted special diplomatic immunity to address our class via secure holographic projection. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Dr. Cruz had been one of his favorite professors at Earth University, where he had taken her course on interspecies communication theory just 2 years ago. There was a very real chance she would recognize him, even through the classroom's recording systems. This represents the first direct communication between the galactic academic community and a living human specimen, Professor Vexithari continued. Dr. Cruz has volunteered to discuss human perspectives on interspecies relations, though she is unaware of the specific nature of our coursework. Jake's mind raced as he considered his options. He could fake illness and skip the lecture, but that would raise questions about his sudden absence during such an important event. He could sit in the back and hope Dr. Cruz would not notice him among the dozens of alien students. Or he could trust that 2 years and his changed appearance would be enough to prevent recognition. He decided to stay. Running would only create suspicion, and he needed to hear what Dr. Cruz would tell the class about humanity. The holographic projection materialized at the front of the lecture hall, showing Dr. Cruz standing in what appeared to be a sterile diplomatic facility. She looked exactly as Jake remembered her, with graying hair, kind eyes, and the patient expression of someone who had spent decades explaining complex concepts to confused students. "Thank you for this opportunity to address your class, Doctor," Cruz began, her image flickering slightly as the transmission adjusted. "I understand you have been studying my species as part of your xenobiology coursework. I hope I can provide some context that might complement your academic materials." Professor Vexithari's form shifted to an attentive blue-green. "Dr. Cruz, our studies have focused on human evolution as apex predators and the behavioral patterns associated with that evolutionary path. We would be interested in your perspective on these findings." Dr. Cruz smiled, but Jake could see the careful calculation behind her expression. She knew exactly what kind of course this was and had been prepared for this line of questioning. "While it's true that humans evolved certain predatory traits, I think there might be some important context missing from your analysis," she replied diplomatically. "Humans are omnivores who developed complex social structures that extend far beyond simple predator-prey relationships." "But Dr. Cruz," interrupted a student from the Pacifican Collective, "our research shows that humans engage in recreational combat and competitive activities that appear to be training for violence. How do you explain this behavior?" "We do enjoy competitive sports and martial arts," Dr. Cruz acknowledged. "But we also write poetry, create music, and care for injured animals. Human behavior cannot be understood through a single lens. We are complex beings capable of both competition and cooperation, often within the same individual." Jake watched his classmates' reactions with fascination. Zixra looked confused, her antennae twitching as she tried to reconcile Dr. Cruz's words with everything they had learned about human predatory nature. "Dr. Cruz," Colin asked hesitantly, "is it true that humans can run continuously for dozens of kilometers without stopping?" "Some humans can, yes. We call it endurance running, and it's often done for personal fitness or charitable fundraising. But we also have humans who prefer reading books, painting pictures, or studying mathematics. Not all humans are marathon runners, just as I assume not all members of your species share identical capabilities." Professor Vexithari interjected with a question that made Jake's stomach tighten. "Dr. Cruz, our models suggest that humans would have difficulty coexisting peacefully with other sentient species due to their predatory instincts. How would you respond to that assessment?" Dr. Cruz paused thoughtfully before answering. "That's an interesting theoretical question. Humans have a strong tendency toward what we call pack bonding with other species. We form emotional attachments, not just with other humans, but with animals, And I suspect we would extend that behavior to other sentient species as well. Pack bonding? Professor Vexithari's coloration shifted to curious purple. Can you elaborate on this concept? Humans have an unusual capacity for forming strong emotional connections with beings outside their own species, Dr. Cruz explained. We domesticate animals not just for utility, but for companionship. We rescue injured wildlife, keep pets purely for emotional satisfaction, and often anthropomorphize objects and concepts. It's one of our defining psychological characteristics. Jake thought about his own relationships at the university. His friendship with Zixra, his protective feelings toward the nervous colon, his growing attachment to his alien classmates. Dr. Cruz was describing exactly what had happened to him over the past semester, but surely this pack bonding would not extend to potential prey species, argued a student whose translator rendered their speech as harmonic tones. Predators do not form emotional attachments to their food sources. Actually, they do, Dr. Cruz replied with a gentle smile. Humans regularly form emotional bonds with species that we also use for food. We keep pigs as beloved pets while other humans raise pigs for meat. We have cats as companions, while acknowledging that they are skilled predators. Humans are quite capable of complex, seemingly contradictory relationships. The lecture continued for another hour, with Dr. Cruz patiently addressing each question while subtly challenging the class's preconceptions about human nature. She acknowledged human capacity for violence while emphasizing their equally strong drives for cooperation, creativity, and compassion. Dr. Cruz, Professor Vexithari asked near the end of the session, if humans were to encounter other sentient species in a first contact scenario, what would be their likely behavior? Curiosity would probably be the dominant response, Dr. Cruz replied. Humans are intensely curious about anything new or different. We would want to learn about other species' cultures, technologies, and perspectives. There would certainly be some humans who might react with fear or hostility, but I believe the majority would be fascinated by the opportunity to meet other intelligent beings. Jake found himself nodding slightly before catching himself. Dr. Cruz was describing exactly how he had felt when he first arrived at Kepler Station University, that mixture of excitement and wonder at encountering so many different forms of intelligent life. As the lecture concluded, Professor Vexithari thanked Dr. Cruz for her time and insights. The holographic projection faded, leaving the class in thoughtful silence. Well, Professor Vexithari said finally, that was certainly illuminating. Dr. Cruz presented a perspective on human behavior that differs significantly from our analytical models. For your final assignment, I want you to write a comparative analysis of Dr. Cruz's descriptions versus our coursework materials. Consider which interpretation is more likely to be accurate and why. After class, Jake lingered behind as students filed out, discussing Dr. Cruz's presentation with mixtures of confusion and skepticism. Many seemed unwilling to abandon their preconceptions about human predatory nature. Jake, can I talk to you? For a moment? Professor Vexithari asked as the last students left the lecture hall. Jake's heart rate spiked, but he approached the professor's platform calmly. Sure, Professor. What can I help you with? You've shown remarkable insight into predatory psychology throughout this course, the professor said, his crystalline form shifting to contemplative purple. Your questions have consistently demonstrated an understanding of predator behavior that goes beyond mere academic study. I find the subject fascinating, Jake replied carefully. Indeed. I'm curious about your thoughts on Dr. Cruz's presentation. Do you believe her portrayal of human behavior, or do you think she was engaging in the deceptive manipulation that our models predict? Jake considered his answer carefully. This could be a test, an attempt to gauge his true reactions to the conflicting information. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between, he said finally. Dr. Cruz might be presenting an idealized version of human behavior, but our models might also be incomplete. Maybe humans are more complex than either perspective suggests. A Diplomatic answer, Professor Vexithari observed. But I sense you have stronger opinions than you're expressing. In your theoretical scenario from earlier this semester, if a human were successfully integrated into galactic society, what would that tell us about the species? Jake met the professor's optical sensors directly. It would tell us that we need to reconsider everything we think we know about predators, prey, and the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Indeed it would, the professor agreed. Such a revelation would require us to completely restructure our understanding of interspecies relations. That evening, Jake sat in his dormitory room working on his final assignment. He found himself in the unique position